Hey everyone, Matt here, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at Academy's 1 to 144 scale, B1. As with most builds these days, we start off in the cockpit. I just gave the entire single piece a coat of light grey. The ejection seats were then hand painted in flat black and olive drab. To finish the cockpit off, I added the decal for the center control panel. I first apply some mark fit for the decal to sit on, and then squeeze the excess out with a cotton bud. A layer of mark fit super strong is applied after and left to dry. One thing I almost forgot to mention was the black panel line wash applied to the cockpit to help give it some texture. The cockpit could then be cemented into place on the lower half of the fuselage. Moving on from the cockpit for now, we can get started on the wing fold mechanism, as the B1's wings can move even after completion of the kit. The first piece to add are these little tabs, which help hold the wings in a set position, as can be seen here. The instrument panel cover was painted in flat black, before applying the decal for the instrument panel itself, using the same steps as previous decal application. One very important step of this model is to add nose weight. Here I just used a couple of coins and hot glue. If not added, it will be a tail sitter. I then used Tamiya extra thin cement and closed the two fuselage halves together. The fit of everything up till this point has been superb. With the fuselage halves together, we really are looking like a B1 now. The next addition was just a couple of pieces in front of the wings, which I believe were some sensor covers, and then some pieces to cover the wing mechanism itself. Before continuing with external construction, the instructions have us look at the ordnance. I personally like the 2,000 pound JDAMs, which were painted in olive drab and light ghost grey. They then cement together to create a stack of 6 bombs. Following the bombs is what I believe to be a fuel tank, which was just painted in flat white. With the white still on the airbrush, the gear bays and the bomb bays could then be painted in the same color. The bombs and the fuel tank was simply cemented into place. Thanks to the superb fit, the gear bay doors and the bomb bay doors could be press fit into place to mask those areas for further painting. Moving back to normal construction, the engine nacelles were then put together with a simple 5-piece construction. To give you some insight into how well this kit fits, just have a listen at how this piece over here snaps into place. The next part of the build is the tail section, which is a separate subassembly with a very simple construction. It's mainly one piece, with part of the elevator mount and the rear sensors to cement on. The whole tail assembly will then just cement onto the main part of the fuselage. Some of the final pieces to add are the nose cone and the targeting pod on the underside of the aircraft. Next up, we can mask the windshield using the included masks in the box. Apologies for the terrible filming here, but the masks did fit perfectly. Finally, with the windshield cemented into place, the overall construction for the model is done, and we can move on to painting. The whole model was primed using Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 in black. Now for the pre-shading, where I use a diluted white paint to mottle inside the panel lines, allowing for some variation in the main paint later. The model was then given an overall coat of gunship grey. With the full paint coat applied, you can now see the tonal variations from our pre-shading earlier. The remaining paint trim can then be applied, with a light grey for the leading edges of the wings and the horizontal stabilizers, and dark grey for the nose cone. As we add the final paint touches, the bomb bay door's interior can be painted with flat white. In order to easily enhance some of the detail, I use a black panel liner. The bomb bay doors are simply then cemented into place. The landing gear can then be assembled, painted, and cemented into place. The model can then be given a gloss coat to be ready for a wash and decals. In this case, I'm using Tamiya X22 clear varnish. I now wanted to make all those panel lines pop a bit, so I used Tamiya black panel liner and filled the panel lines throughout the model. The excess was then wiped off with a cotton bud dipped in enamel thinners. Next up was the exterior decals, which were applied in the exact same way as the decals earlier on in the build. With all the decals applied, they could then be sealed into place using a satin varnish. The final piece of the build are the exhaust nozzles, which are given a nice coat of Mr. Metal Color dark iron. After removing most of the paint from the brush, some silver is then dry brushed onto the exhausts in order to highlight some of the raised details. This is how the finished exhausts looked. They were then cemented onto the aircraft. All that's left to do now is remove the masking tape on the windshield, and with that done, the build is finished. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed putting it together, and here are the final photos.